Greetings and welcome to the Destination Goa Trance podcast, bringing in depth interviews with artists, label people, organizers from the golden age of the 90s to the modern era. My name is Tibus, and I'm here with the one and only Simon Peter.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Let's talk about Goa trance.
This is our first episode. Peter, can you tell us a little bit about our podcast?
Our aim is to chat about our favorite releases, collect stories of legendary parties and inspirational psychedelic experiences, and learn about all the tricks of creating the magical tunes that we all love. You want to know about the origins of psychedelic festival culture? How was your favorite album recorded? The secret sauce of the biggest dance floor hits? We are here to ask the movers and shakers of the scene to find out. Tibus, could you introduce our first guest?
Sure, our first guest is Billy from Cosmosis. Cosmosis is one of the influential god trance acts from the 90s. They released one of the first full-length albums of the genre, titled Cosmology, which is an absolute classic. The project was originally a duo, but the other member, Jeremy, left after the first album and later continued as Laughing Buddha while Cosmosis became Billy's solo act. Cosmosis released more than 1,000 EPs, 7 full-length albums, and 2 collaborative efforts with Quantica and one with Adja. His newest project is Ultra Vibe, which is with Yanis from Filteria, and their first album is expected later this year. Peter, what is your first memory of Cosmosis? Where did you hear him?
I remember when I started collecting Goa trance back in the early 2000s, and I was listening to this mixed compilation called The Psychedelic Experience. It's a pretty energetic mix of great dance floor shakers from 99, and towards the end of the mix, I heard this heavy guitar riff which blew my mind at the time. That track was In Your Face Part 2, and ever since that, I kept my ears peeled for anything by Cosmosis.
When I got into Goa trance, I also collected vinyls at that time. And I remember that I ordered a package online of used Goa trance vinyls, and one of them was Cosmology by Cosmosis. I was blown away when I listened to it first, and I'm still listening to that record till this day. Have you ever seen Cosmosis live?
Yeah, the last time I saw him was at Apsara in August of 2023. It was an awesome gig. He played for an already hyped up old school crowd on the last day of the festival, and yeah, people were having a blast. It was great.
Unfortunately, I couldn't be there, but I heard so many good things about that festival and this live act, especially. So I decided to go and see him at Space Safari, where he played a magical retro set. And yeah, I decided at that moment that I want to invite him to this podcast as one of our first guests.
We caught up with Billy online and had a chat about his career as a musician from the very beginnings all the way to the present day. Shout out to the guys at Suntrip Records for their support with this. And now you will hear the first part of our pretty lengthy interview in this episode. Welcome to our show, Destination Goa Trance. It's the first episode, actually.
Oh, cool.
And it's an honor to have you here. I think if anybody knows you from your live gigs, they probably know that you're a guitarist, and that's how your musical journey or career in music started, right? So can you tell a little bit of us about how you started playing the guitar? How did you started as a musician? What were your first inspirations to play music?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I won't bore you with the whole history, but let me see. Going back to about, let me see. I've been playing in bands since the early 80s. Professionally, since I can't actually remember though, it's been that long ago, but probably 35 years I've been playing professionally. And I was in lots of different bands. I was a session guitarist for a while.
Mhm.
I played in kind of rock bands, blues bands, jazz bands, pop bands. I had my own band for quite a long time. Um, trying to make it in the music business, and doing just gigs everywhere. And also, while that was going on, I was also in a covers band, another band with a lot of the same personnel. We were in a van driving all over the country playing gigs. That was how I used to earn my living. And then I used to, after that, play in. I was in several different bands at the same time as a floating guitarist, just getting paid per gigs. Anybody that would pay me to play, or needed a guitarist for X amount of gig or a few shows. And I did some tours in Europe and Australasia doing that kind of stuff. I was mainly playing acid jazz, which was a thing in the 90s. He remembers that, like mid-90s, which is kind of a crop between hip hop, rap, bit of jazz and bit of funk. Yeah, so I've done loads of different types of music, and I've been recording for a long time as well. It was probably around the mid-80s that I got my first 4-track recording studio called a Porter Studio.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 4-track cassette recorder with a little mixer built in. It was really crap quality, but it was awesome for the time, because you could multi-track. Yeah, I could play guitar on one track, bass on another, put a drum machine on another, or get a singer, and then bounce those tracks over and do a harmony vocal and all that. So it was amazing at the time. So I've been involved in recording for a long time. But I think it was So that's about what I want to blither on about of the early history.
And why the guitar? Why not the bass or the drums or not singing?
I'm a bit of a crap vocalist. I can hold a tune, but I just don't have a very good voice. I mean, I really wish as a musician I could sing really well. That it's the ultimate instrument, I think. But I mean, I can hold a tune and I can sing a bit, and I've sang live, but I just, some people are born tall, some people are born with a fantastic physique, some people are born incredibly handsome, but some people are born not very handsome. It's just a fact that you're genetically gifted with the voice or not. You can train what you've got, but if you don't have a really good voice to start with, from my point of view, I think, who wants to hear my wispy little voice? I've worked with too many really excellent singers, but I have sang on a few recordings I've done reasonably lately in the last couple of years, which is, I don't only do trance, I mainly do trance and electronic music, but I also do other stuff on the side, just for fun mainly. So I do sing on a few things, but no one really wants to hear my voice. I'm a better guitar player than I'm a singer.
And who were your guitar heroes? I suspected one of them is David Gilmour, but what?
Of course. Absolutely, David Gilmour and Pink Floyd generally. This is the music I grew up on, that rock, Led Zeppelin and blues and Pink Floyd and Supertramp and all that. So I met Dave Gilmour in a pub once in London, in a really tiny little pub. And I went up to him. There was about 4 people in the bar. And I said, David Gilmour? And he said, yeah. I said, can I buy you a drink? He said, yeah, sure. Well, so I bought him a beer and we had a chat. He's such a lovely bloke. It was all I could do to not fall on my knees and go, I'm not worthy. But, lovely bloke. And I told him I'd nicked all of his guitar licks. He was completely fine with that. My early guitar heroes, there's loads of them. It's just not really guitar focused, so I won't babble on about all that stuff. But Carlos Santana and Dave Gilmour and Hendrix and Jimmy Page and those guys, mainly blues players, Stevie Ray Vaughan as well in particular.
Nice. And you mentioned that you basically were the session guitarist in the late 80s.
Yeah.
I wanted to find recordings of you, and I went to Discogs and I dig really deep, but the only band I could find, their name was UTE, or I'm not sure if there's a sound.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Are there others? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I was hired by those guys. Yeah. But when I say session guitarist, I was more of a kind of, I was just hired for live stuff, really. A few recording sessions, but by that time, the sampler was just coming in. And so what nobody it really killed off the whole session business, really, because no one can be bothered to hire a guitarist because you could just buy your CD-ROM of 1,000 rhythm guitar licks, take a loop, and then loop it. And everybody was into loops music then, and hip hop was really becoming a thing then, and it was all loops, all little small loops. So that just killed it off, really. I really came into my own about the same time that studio session musicians were becoming a thing of the past. And unless you're a singer, and a singer, it was quite difficult to nick things off of CD-ROMs. You really need a singer to do backing vocals. You needed to hire a person. But guitarists, it just killed it off. A bit like this string synthesizer killed off the session scene for orchestral string musicians in the 80s as well.
Was this the time when you become a funkster, or was that later?
What intergalactic fluorofunkster?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Ute. When I was playing with Ute, I at the same time I was writing trance music, so I was on tour in Australia with that band, and I met some guys that were into trance music, and I played them some of the stuff that I was making in my home studio, and they were really into it. It was some of the early Cosmosis stuff, actually. And so they overlapped. When I was playing in I was also playing in the Cosmosis project. Me and Jez were recording with that. And then after a while, I got more interested in the electronic and the trance stuff. Much more interested, actually. So I left that behind and then got on with focus more on the electronics.
There are funk influences in your trance music. You can hear that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a bit of a problem with trance music these days in that it only refers to itself, in that the references that people use when they get inspired to make trance music is other trance music. And the narrower and narrower focus it gets, it all becomes the same track because no one's bringing in any influences from outside of the genre. So the genre gets narrower and narrower. There used to be a band in the, I think it was the 80s or maybe even late 70s, called Pop Will Eat Itself.
Yeah.
I never ever heard any of their music that they ever did, but the name always stuck with me because I thought it was a really clever name, because it was referring to that very same thing, was that if pop music refers to pop music as an influence, then it becomes narrow and it will eat itself. It will just become, like a snake swallowing its tail and get smaller and smaller.
Yep. So was your introduction to trance music or electronic music in general through meeting other musicians who were already more kind of versed in it or more into it? So like you mentioned Youth and maybe other musicians who you played together with, or how can you recall what was your first kind of rave or kind of a party that really hit you and pulled you in to electronic music?
Well, I think I think the first influence was my brother. My brother at the time was a real gym junkie. He used to go down the gym pumping at the time, and they used to play music at the gym. And he used to say to me, "Well, you should really check this music out. It's really awesome. This, all this like it was acid music at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I don't know, was it mid 80s or no, it was probably late 90s. No, sorry, late 80s. 1991. So, and he brought him a couple of cassette tapes and played them some. And I said, "That's not music. That's just computer generated nonsense."
Mhm.
I had a bit of a sad attitude at the time, because I was a musician, I was used to playing with other human beings. That's music, but stuff played with computers is not music. And he played me a few times, and after a while, I thought, actually, this is really interesting. And I now recognise a lot of it was kind of early hard floor, which was
Mhm.
basically it's a 101 doing a bass line, a 909 machine, and a 303 just squawking away. Just,
Mhm.
it's great. And I remember thinking, what the hell is them making that noise? That's so weird, these 303.
Mhm.
But yeah, so he kind of opened my eyes to it, but I still didn't quite get it because I thought it was interesting and weird, but I didn't get the doom, 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 doom all the way through. What the heck was that? And then I went out to a club once in London. Some mates said, "Hey, we're going to go up to London and go to SW1, this club." So I said, "Yeah, sure." So I I went to this. Suffice to say that I went to this club one night, and I spent all night dancing. And I suddenly got what the massive beat drum is about. A big pumping sound system. And yeah, so that was my introduction. And I thought, oh, God, I get it now. That I stayed up all night, as you do, clubbing, and then in the morning I was still cruising on. No, I wrote a track on my little studio, just using a drum machine, like a dance music track, first one I ever wrote. Like that night, I hadn't even slept. I was like so inspired by it. So yeah, and then a little bit later on, I started to make this kind of music, dance music. I got what the kick drum and the bass line was all about, and then um, I was making with a friend of mine lived on the other side of the small town I used to live. I was making kind of a cross between early trance or trancey stuff and house because he was into house. So we were making this stuff. He had a sampler, and his mate that he used to make music with said to me, "Do you know what you really should meet my mate Jeremy because he likes that weird music that you're into as well." Because I was kind of more into the trancey stuff, and he introduced me to Jez, who lived little quite close to me, and by that time I'd heard some of the early Dragonfly records, first releases like Mandragora and a few of the like early Man with No Name. And when I met Jez, he actually had some of these records. I got on like a cassette tape. He actually had the vinyls, and he knew this record shop in London, this little tiny record shop that was selling all this weird music. Hardly when I say all this weird music, there was hardly any of it about. And so he had a small collection of early Dragonfly records and a few other one or two early Tip releases as well. So and suddenly we were just both onto this thing. What is this really? Where can we find some more music like this? And then we started finding out there's through Jez actually. Jez had a mate that went to a party. It's an early Tip party he went to, and then an early Dragonfly party as well. These underground parties with these punch bowls with these odd concoctions of liquid that you drink at the door, and nobody knew about them. And you got this tiny little flyer, like little fluoro flyer. Oh, look, there's one tonight. So we went to a couple of those, and then mind blown, and then it just snowballed from there. Then we just got mad, just spent all the time trying to make better trance music, Yeah, and so we began to meet some people and got onto the scene there. I found a whole bunch of weirdo hippies that liked all this weird music and stayed up all night dancing to it. So yeah, it was good fun.
What was in the music that attracted you the most? Because there was a lot of other early electronic music styles back then: big beat, acid house, the old school techno. What is in this type of music that you said this is what I need to do, and what's the reason behind that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's difficult to nail down really, but it just appealed to me. One thing, it didn't sound like any other music. It really didn't. It was like a completely new genre. Uh, it had melodic elements, which was nice, and it was symphonic in a way. It's kind of melodic, and also it had a lot of. It was very trippy. In other words, you know, coming from a musical background, you couldn't really separate the melody from the harmony, and the it was and because there's a lot of delay going on, and a lot of rhythmic delay, and a lot of filter sweeping, which is like changing of different frequencies throughout each note. So it gave it did not sound like and was not made like normal music. So the novelty of it, for one thing, attracted me, but I like it. Just the sound of it appealed to me. It's spoke to me, to use that awful cliche.
So when you met Jazz, was he already into music making, or he was more like a record collector? Was the whole Cosmosis project started out as your initial tracks, or did you sat down together at one point and said, yeah, we should make this kind of music and start doing this?
Well, I had a small studio. Jez didn't have a studio, but he was a musician.
Mm-hmm.
He's very gifted musician, actually, Jez. He got a scholarship to the Yehudi Menuhin School as a cellist. He's a superb classical musician, as was his father and his mother, extremely high-level classical musicians. But I think Jez rebelled somewhat because he bought a guitar. Oh my God, a guitar, electric guitar. And he was listening to all this kind of trance music. But he didn't have a studio, and but his enthusiasm for the music was just overwhelming. And combined with my enthusiasm for it, we said, "Great, let's make some more. Let's make some of this shit." That's what we did. And we went shopping around and buying crappy old analog synths and anything we could get our hands on to plug it all together. And this combined with my bits and pieces. I had an Atari computer at the time. Yeah, it had a really big memory of 1 megabyte. It was the super version. Like 12 to 1024. Yeah, so, with a screen about that big, and this tiny little thing. But and a copy of Cubase 1 for PC.
That was the main sequencer then, I guess.
No, the Cubase 1 for PC was after I got a PC. But yeah, I had Atari Cubase. Go on.
Mm-hmm. So that was your main sequencer basically then, right?
At the time, yes. Soon after that, though, at the time when I met Jazz, yeah, but soon after that, I got a PC. And I was it 16 megabytes of RAM it had. So it's like awesome, totally awesome. And I put a sampler card into it, which had 4 outputs, and hard disk recording facilities, which had 2 outputs. What else? Yeah, and it was a 486 DX. Yeah, so not exactly a powerful computer, but pretty awesome for the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the time when the whole kind of home recording studios became a new thing, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly. It was just the crossover point where you could do MIDI recording at home, but you couldn't really do disc recording. So it was around that point where it was still before proper decent disc recording, but I could do stereo recording. So we could mix the track live onto a DAT, dump the DAT into a 2-track editor, and then we could edit in the 2-track. We couldn't do any more than that. We could just edit the 2-track. So that was the facility we had on the first record.
Why did you call the project Cosmosis? Where did its name come from?
I can't. Oh, I remember. I think Jez came up with that actually. Yeah, he definitely did. We said did we have a gig already at that time? I think we might have had a gig booked already. No, of course not. No, we didn't. That was a bit later. No, we said we got to call this project something. Let's have a brainstorm. Get a pen and paper. We list all the names quickly without thinking about it. So we just spewed out about 30 options. And we looked at it and we said, yeah, that one. We both agree Cosmosis is good. I think he came up with that word. Yeah. So it was Jez that named Cosmosis actually. Ironically, we decided to set out as a production company called Laughing Buddha Music Productions, and we were going to have Cosmosis as one of the acts. And it was my name was Laughing Buddha Music Productions, but in the end, Jez ended up using the name Laughing Buddha, and I ended up using the name Cosmos. So we kind of named each other, if you know what I mean.
Yes. But for a while, you both worked on both projects, right? So you had a time when you were releasing tracks under the name Laughing Buddha as well, but for different labels, right?
That's right, yeah. Because when we signed to Transient, we didn't realize it at the time because we were a bit dumb and naive. But when it meant that we couldn't use the name Cosmosis to release other music with other labels because it was in the contract. So we just, well, all right, well, if we release a tip, we'll call it Laughing Buddha then. You know, that was our way of circumventing the restrictions imposed on us.
EP was the cannabinoid.
That's right.
Looking back on that 3-track EP, what are your most cherished memories?
40 years ago, actually.
Yeah, it's got a long time ago, isn't it? I probably was. Bear in mind that we were pretty active on going to these very underground parties in London at the time, in these dodgy old warehouses with the same people, the same weirdos, and we we walked into Return to the Source. I remember going into Return to the Source. It was a great club to go to at the time. And as we walked in, me and Jess Cannabinoid was playing, and the whole floor was going bananas. Thought, yes, this is good. This is our new record that we released, and it's people are going bananas. Also, there was a Dragonfly party when I remember being on the dance floor, and was Dante Figura on the other side? I think it was. Was it?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's one of the tracks from that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were in this Dragonfly party, and the DJ put on Dante Figura on the intro, and people just went bananas. And they were like, wow, this is great. Yeah, so those kind of things are golden memories, you know, when you have when you've worked really hard on something, and then you see the result of it on people on the floor, and
Yeah.
it's even better than you expected. You know?
Something I always wanted to know, the cannabinoid title. So it's someone who is paranoid of cannabis, or he's paranoid of the cannabis, so he doesn't want to take it, or it's because he became paranoid because of the consumption.
And it's a fun title.
Yeah, exactly. It's silly, you know, how far can they control my mind?
Yeah.
It's just a bit of fun, yeah. Because let's face it, that is what happens a lot. If someone gets a bit stoned, they get a bit paranoid.
Yeah.
You already play live after this release.
Yes. In fact, I think I'm not sure whether it was after we released that or maybe even before it came out, but maybe it was after. I can't remember. But we got a call from Return to the Source, saying, "Can you play a live show?" And this at the time was the biggest club in Goa club. It had started to explode actually. This underground party scene, and suddenly it became this. Was it a monthly event? I think it was a monthly event at that time, and it was packed, and it was a really good vibe and a great place. And they asked us, "Hey, can you play a gig?" They phoned us up when I was at the studio and with Jez, and I said to Jez, put a hand on fire. I said, "Jez, they want us to play a live gig." He's like, "Great, but how do we do it?" I said, "I don't know." And I said, can you play a live gig on 16th of September? Yeah, sure. No problem. Yeah. How much? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, fine. I said, yes, they want to pay us blah, 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 blah for this. Great. Yeah. Oh, well, on the 16th, no problem. I see you, put down. And then we thought, fuck, how are we going to play a live gig? Shit, So, that's how that happened. We said yes to the gig before we even knew how before we'd ever played a gig, you know. So yeah, we can do that. How the fuck do you do it? So in the end, we ended up. I was playing a bit of live guitar. We dragged a synthesizer along, a Juno, to make a few noises, and played pretty much the tunes off of that, and just did some funny noises in between with some intros, and outros, and stuff with guitar, and lots of delay and all that. Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, you also mentioned Dance the Figures was it has some guitar samples in it. I don't know how prevalent that already was in Goa trance at the time. We were trying to come up with a few tracks that had guitar in them, but it sounded a bit different than what other people were doing at the time with that when it comes to guitar samples, I guess. So how did you do the track, and did you try to kind of emulate some kind of a sound, or was it like yeah, I'm a guitarist, I'll put guitar into a goth trance track? What was the idea behind that?
Listen, second, really. I don't remember there being a guitar in any of the trance tracks that we heard, but guitars in mine was just, oh, we can use that because I can play it and it's hanging around. Why not? So do a kind of rocky version. Why not? So I can't remember any other tracks. I doubt whether it was the first track with the guitar in it, but to a first trance track with a guitar in it, I really don't know. But yeah, I just set the amp up, old school with a mic, and just recorded that riff, and then just chucked it in the little sample. We had, I think, 10 meg of sample memory, so put it in there and just triggered it from there. Oh, yeah, there's some feedback bits in there that I did. Just turn the amp up to get it feeding back, and recorded a bit of that and put it in the track.
Yeah, and later you created a different version of that track, right? The In Your Face Part 2, which is kind of like the same melody or same idea, right?
Yeah, it's the same sample, actually. Yeah, that's right. I kind of remixed it. I think that was that on a B-side somewhere or on a vinyl. I can't remember where it came out, but yeah, I remember doing that.
Yeah, I do remember it came out on some of the compilations around the time. But yeah, before we get there, I think we can talk a little bit more about the first album, actually. So you had a couple of LPs. I think there were two EPs, as they were called at the time, right? Like the singles, so to say, that you released before the album, right? Or so that was the Cannabinoid EP, and then was Deus as well? Or was it already after the album came out?
No, I think theirs was before, and then there was also the one with Sunny Acid as well. That release,
Oh yeah, indeed.
and there might have been another one. I think.
A Gift of the Gods maybe as well. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. We released a fair few vinyls on Transient. I think Karma came out under Laughing Buddha around that.
Yeah.
That's it. But yeah, what do you want to know about that?
So basically the first album was a kind of a collection of those earlier releases, right? Or how did you decide that you wanted to have this on an album?
Well, the thing was, in those days, you actually used to get paid for releasing records. That's disappeared, but that's how it used to be. We actually used to get quite well paid when we used to release a single. We didn't sell that many singles, but used to get quite a large proportion of the money of the album or the EP cost paid to you. Not only did you get paid per sale by the record company, but we also got MCPS, mechanical royalties, and also royalties from any play on radios as well, because we're both members of the Performing Rights Society and we registered each of the works. So we still actually get paid for those occasionally, only, a couple of quid, but I get statements where that's been played in some random place in Bulgaria or radio or something like that. I get threepence for each, and they all add up. But the point was that I just want to explain something about selling records. Right. So we released, let's say, Gift of the Gods. It came out as on one side of the single. We got paid quite reasonably well, for that. Then it got put on a compilation. And each compilation it got put on, we got paid, I don't know, 300 quid. Let's call it 900 quid in today's money, for putting pounds, not 900 euros, let's say. Yeah, split between us. That's all right. It just got put in another compilation. It got put onto Destination Goa or to blah blah blah, and blah blah blah, big German compilation or whatever.
Yeah, also the Return to the Source compilations as well. We mentioned
exactly. So each time it got put on one, we'd get paid. Each time it went onto one of those, and then we put it on the album. And then we, got paid for that because we sold the album. And then actually in the case of Gift of the Gods, it got used in this awful, crappy Hollywood movie, but it was a Hollywood movie. And they wanted, I think, 28 seconds of it used in a scene in 9.5 Weeks 2 with Mickey Rourke. Which is it's a dreadful film. It really is. It's just terrible. It's like the worst kind of thing when they have a reasonably successful film and they make a terrible sequel. Anyway, that wasn't the point. The point was we got paid big bucks for that. So this is like one record. You get paid here, you get paid for the singles, you get paid for the compilations, you get paid for the album, and you got paid for if it going on it's part of a film track. So, but sadly, all of that's disappeared. But yeah, so that was how it used to work back then.
When you had enough tracks, you decided that now it's time for the album, or there were contractual obligations. How did that all come together?
Well, we had set out to write an album, me and Jez. What we got when we got a deal with Transient, it was like 2 singles on an album, something like that. That they were obliged to do. We ended up doing more than 2 singles, well more than that. But so we set out to write an album, and we released a few of the tracks singly, and then we released some of the tracks from the album as part of singles or EPs before they went on the album. So we had set out to do an album, and then the next time after that, I then made another contract with Transient to make Synergy, just me, and just made a deal with whichever album's record label he used after that. So I mean, we had set out to write Cosmosis as an album, yes.
Well, Cosmology.
Actually, what it was, we just sit down to make music, to make music. So that's what we're into. So however it came out was however it came out. But we had specifically sat down with Trans and say, yeah, we're going to do an album. And we were then going to produce 8 or 9 tracks to make the album. And funny enough, we did sit down to make that an album. So if we even had a kind of basic plan, the last track is a reprise of all the other all the other tracks. It's got bits of samples of all of the other tracks, all in the same track at the end, which is called that chill out track at the end, Afterglow. But we kind of planned it so it'll build up, and then it'll have this track and that track. Then it'll kind of tail off. So we kind of built up So in other words, this probably isn't given much consideration these days because people just do tracks. And they don't even think of albums. But when I was growing up, and Jez as well, because he's a bit of an old fart as well by this time, we used to listen to albums. He used to go in a darkened room, smoke a spliff, and listen to a whole album or 2. And the whole thing was an experience, the whole thing, not just tracks. So we did approach Synergy in that way to make it an album that people would listen to the whole thing.
Regarding Cosmology, where did the backdrum that you used for the cover came from?
That is the very talented Nagma, who is Jez's wife, girlfriend at the time. She was an art student, and she painted that on a really big, I don't know, let me see, it's about 2.5 meter by 2.5 meter black canvas, and she painted it under fluoro lights. And it's actually three-dimensional. In other words, some of the bits of it come out physically out in front of the painting. And then we had a photographer come and put black lights on, set up a camera and shoot it just on a photograph of that. And that used to hang in the studio, actually. And we used to work under fluoro lights. We were such fluoro freaks at the time. We could only work under fluoro lights with joss sticks happening, nag shamper joss sticks and black light, to get the vibe. And it does make a difference. To this day, I can't hear properly if I work in a bright room. I mean, when I'm working here, I don't have these lights on. It has to be dim. I think that's because your sight is your dominant sense. And if it's bright and you can see, that takes over. Whereas I notice with me, if I have the lights dimmer, my ears can hear better. It's a strange thing, but I cannot work in bright lights on music. I mean, I work on anything else, but if I'm doing music, it has to be dull lighting. It helps focus my auditory sense, stops my visual sense dominating.
Fanny Acid is one of my all-time favorite God trance tracks. Can you tell a little secret about that?
What do I remember about? I love the bass. There's a bass station riff at the beginning, not like a 303 thing, but just a kind of saw wave thing. Jez made that particular riff right at the beginning. It got a bit of portamento, little sliding thing. I love that. What can I say, really? It's actually me babbling on in the sample in the middle, babbling on about red lights. Sunny Acid, the title, Sunny Acid, I used to know a lot of the time, a lot of people that were into Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, was a Indian guru type. And I used to knew loads of people in that kind of community, and they were called sannyasins. And so that became Sunny Acid, the track, that track. But yeah, that's all I can say about it. I don't remember much else about it, really, I can say.
Which one is your favorite
Which one, what?
track of the album?
Well, on that particular album, I like Afterglow, actually. I also like Gift of the Gods. I'd say it's probably my favourite one. It is full on, though. I have to be in the right mood for it. What else is on there? Sandy Acid, Key to the Universe I like as well.
And Morphic Resonance is also on that album. And I checked that that's your most released album. It appeared on more than 10 compilations.
What, that particular track?
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I was listening to a podcast with Ian McGilchrist and Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake is the guy that came up with the idea of morphic resonance, and just listened to that a couple of days ago. But yeah, I don't know whether you know, he's a scientist, but he's a heretical scientist.
Yeah.
He's not fully scientific material, not a scientific materialist. He postulates that there are other things that we can't quite measure that are causing phenomena. Fascinating bloke. But yeah, morphic resonance, that's named after one of his concepts. But yeah, I play that out when I play retro sets. I'm surprised to how well that track works. It's quite simple. It's quite a simple thing, and it just kind of bleeps on, and then it gets 303 up halfway through. But it's very simple, but it really is a very effective track. That I do speed it up a bit though for today's dance floors.
So how was touring with those tracks back then, maybe compared to today's crowds? I mean, there was a time after the 90s, like in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, when this kind of style was completely gone, or it seemed that there was uh, no need for it anymore, or no people were not many people were into it, so to say. There was a small, strong crowd that was still following this kind of old school Goa trance style, but now it's returning. And how do you see? Is it like a different reaction you get from the crowds? Are like people uh, reacting to it as they were back in the 90s when they heard them first? And how does it feel playing those tracks again compared to when you played them first when you went out on a tour with those tracks?
Well, it depends on the party, because in the early days of the early parties, I don't want to sound like too much of a in the old days, but there was a certain how do you call it? A certain vibe, a certain way of partying that was during those days that set it apart from going to a house party or the other stuff, which was that people used to um, it was a kind of joyful time. People used to really enjoy the music, and it was very much a celebratory thing. It wasn't so much of a let's get out of it and be, although there was plenty of that going on, but it wasn't about it wasn't quite so aggressive. It's quite more of a joyful, dancey celebration, and that and that people seemed to take responsibility for that, for making the party vibe. People seemed to realize that it was up to them to create a party as opposed to going onto a party and going, okay, do it to me.
Mm.
Is this a good party or isn't it? Rather than that, it's like I'm responsible for creating the vibe. So there was more of that around. And so what I noticed with, let's take, for example, that party that you were stage managing at, Peter. What was it called again?
Apsara, like in Hungary, it was.
That vibe there was, interestingly enough, was very much the same kind of vibe that it used to be back in those days. So it's not necessarily the music; it's the attitude towards creating a vibe. Uh, and oddly enough, it seemed to have survived all those years. That particular strain of partying seemed to have somehow uh, survived over the years, and it still exists. But the vibe at that party, Apsara, was very much the old school vibe of people going and having fun. Like really, really kicking off, having a good time, and people deliberately putting energy into making it a good vibe on the dance floor. So so it depends on the party, but generally at the old school events, you generally speak tend to get more of that, people creating a good time, knowing that they have to create the vibe rather than having the vibe done to them and being disappointed because it didn't happen.
Back in the day, how was these tours actually? There was no internet. How did you organize going? I know you played a lot in Far East. I think you also got to Goa. How did it happen without all these modern tools that we are used to nowadays?
And also carrying the equipment. I mean, probably you had more stuff to carry around, like synthesizers and sequencers and whatnot. So how did you guys manage back then?
Well, when it came to India, no one took any equipment to India because it's just dusty, it gets stolen, or it's too hot, So people used to take DATs. And that's what me and Jez did. Took DATs when we played in India and Goa. But if it was a gig in France or whatever, in the early days, we used to take a guitar and a rack thing with a compressor and, some other rack stuff in it and a keyboard case and all that. But we soon stopped doing that because it was just, it was just too much. I remember playing a party in France and taking all that stuff and just thinking, this is just complete pain in the arse, and being at airports and getting SKB cases, rat cases, stuff. So we gave all that up, and then you could then just hire, you could get the promoter to hire a keyboard or a few bits of equipment, but mostly it was pre-recorded. It just became the thing to do, to pre-record stuff and play either new mixes of stuff that you've done, or slightly different mixes, or just play your mixes from a DAT or from CD. That's the reality of it. Because trance music is not made live, in other words, it's a sequencer anyway, there's not a whole, the paradigm of band is a bit misplaced. If you've got a bass guitar, drums, and a singer, and they go into a rock and roll recording studio and they record it, them playing live and release it as a record, then you kind of expect them to go and recreate that thing when you go and sing live. But if music is a whole bunch of sequences and then you press go, record it, and stop, taking that equipment and recreating that whole thing is just a complete waste of time. Is why. No, and no one cares, because it's a party and people don't care about what you're doing on stage because they're partying. Well, they should be, because it's not so much an audience watching thing as it is a participatory thing. So those kind of two paradigms somehow got a bit mixed up. Having said that, I do tend to prefer to have at least one live element, i.e. guitar, a bit of synth squiggling or whatever going on, because it adds a bit of risk and it makes something a bit different. And it stops me from getting bored when I'm playing live because I'm doing something. And with the case of a guitar, it's very much it's a performance tool, really. A guitar, just put a guitar on, people go, "Yay!" It's like, I haven't played anything yet. It's because they see a guitar, they think, "Yeah, rock," or something. I don't know what it is. So that's what I have to say about that.
Has it become easier to tour like that? I guess it's now a bit different than back in those days. As you mentioned, you don't have to carry around so many equipment and so different, so many stuff. But
many people did back then either. I mean, unless you're talking about, let's say, Total Eclipse, or in like the really early days, or maybe Oud or a few other people that were like, no, we've got to take the whole studio with all five of us, with all the equipment, and set up and play. There was a few people that were real sticklers, and good on them for doing it. But the practical considerations, things that could go wrong, there's equipment to get lost and stolen or whatever. It was just it's a massive amount of risk for like no real gain. Because as I said, people don't care.
Yeah, but there was an emphasis on like bringing something new each time, right? Like as you mentioned, to bring a new mix of the track, or bring the newest track to a party. So were you kind of trying to push the new music all the time when you were invited, or was it something the organizers expected to do from musicians? Or
I mean, what me and Jez would do, or I would do, is I'd just play out tracks, as well as the tracks that people expected me to play, that they wanted me to play, that they would have been pissed off if I didn't play. Then I would play tracks that I was working on and that I finished, and I'd play them out and go, "Oh yeah, that works. Oh, that is a bit long." So I'd make notes and go, "Okay, cut those 8 bars out." So I'd test things. And always be excited to play new stuff out. So tracks on the go, or tracks that were finished, but they needed to be played out a few times to see where it worked, where it doesn't work. Because that's the best feedback you can get. It's just seeing watching the reaction. It's very easy to tell if a section's too long. I can usually do it in the studio these days, but sometimes you do a track, you think, "Oh, that's great." You play it and you think, "Oh no, this 8 bars is just the excitement just drops off on the dance floor a little bit, that I could just edit that out and go back and redo it." So it's useful to play stuff out from that point of view. So yeah, there was some new tracks, but most of the time it's tracks that people want to hear. In other words, the new element was the new tracks or tracks that were.
You mentioned that you had two separate projects so that you can accommodate the TIP record label. Did you have any conscious decision regarding the Laughing Buddha sound, or they could work as composite tracks?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, because we were going to release, because we released some things with Tip, and also Return to the Source with the Laughing Buddha track. It was a conscious decision to make it a little bit more psychedelic, as we saw it. So those tracks were a little bit more leaning towards perhaps slightly less melodic, a little more psychedelic, whatever that means. But a little bit more abstract sometimes, a little bit less melodic. So like that was the basic kind of, if there was a difference, then that was it.
Why did you split in 97?
Well, Jess had a different focus at the time. He was living with his girlfriend on the other side of London. It was becoming difficult for me to drive over there, and I wanted to just get on and make music.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in West London. He was living in North London.
Okay.
It takes quite a long time to drive because of the traffic.
Well, it's terrible for driving. It's too large.
I try to avoid it whenever I can, driving in traffic. Thankfully, I don't live anywhere near London now, so it's not.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview in the next episode.
Thanks for listening, people. We compiled a playlist of all the music mentioned in this episode that you can listen to on Spotify and Apple Music. The link is in the show notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe for more. If you have any ideas, questions, leave a comment or message us on Facebook or Instagram.